And don't forget to watch us. We are on your computer, your mobile device. Just head on over to SuperTalk TV. And we all know that team sports can have a lasting impact on young students, and that was the inspiration behind our guest, author Joe Lee's latest book. He co-authored this book, The Saints of St. Mary. And so welcome back, Joe.
Hi, Rebecca. It's good to see you.
And you're the co-author of this one, so you had the inspiration of the coach that's featured in this book. That's Mike Frascogna Jr.
Yes, Mike Frascogna Jr. is he's lived in Jackson for many, many years. He is senior partner at FLG Law Firm in Jackson. And long ago in South Jackson, he served as a volunteer head football coach. This is with 5th and 6th graders, Rebecca. Think Bad News Bears. This is summer of 1969. Bunch of ragtag kids, many of whom who had never played an organized sports before. And, you know, looking like Joe Namath back in 1969, Mike, who was in law school, rolls up in his Corvette or whatever he was driving then and pops out. And those kids think, hey, we finally got a football coach. But I think an hour and a half later, those kids, after they'd been run almost to the point of hospitalization out there in the brutal Mississippi sun and humidity, were ready to drop. But what he did over 4 years, Rebecca, was turn them not only into a football juggernaut, but there were life lessons and takeaways imparted. And St. Mary's had a Catholic church right there on campus, a school and a church right there in West Jackson. It was a neighborhood situation where you had families that were out there with 4, 5, 6, 7 brothers and sisters that were going to church and going to school there. Our friend Gerard Gibbert, who hosts here on the network Midday, he was one of those players. He's in the book. But life lessons, always be on time. Respect your school on and off the field. Do your best and believe that what you didn't think was possible is within reach.
Because when he first came in, do they call him, what do they call him, coach?
Yeah.
Coach, when they call him, when he first came on the scene, they didn't necessarily have a winning record, right? They hadn't, I don't think, beat their rival in a while. Maybe they weren't doing so well, and they didn't have a coach for very long. And I was reading, it says that they came in and he was basically like, we're going to be a winning team, and we're going to beat the rival. Who was the rival that they had?
That was St. Richard's.
St. Richard's. And I'm sure the kids were like, oh, aren't you cute? Especially probably the parents. I mean, 5th and 6th graders, I kind of have that mindset now. Like I have a 6th grader going into 7th, so I'm trying to put myself into maybe the student's position when someone came in, and my kid would get riled up from that. Like I think if an authoritative figure said, we're coming in, we're going to win. Like, I think my kid would get so excited to, like, see that happen. And you feel like that's part of, like, what happened? Because, once you get older, you get jaded. Like, it's hard to tell an 18-year-old you're going to beat your rival if you haven't done it in, like, 10 or 12 years. But, like, younger kids, they kind of believe in the impossible.
Oh, yeah. And these kids, and I interviewed Gerard and Al Nuzzo and John Coughlin, folks who have gone on to big things in everything from the business world to philanthropy to the practice of law and medicine. And they talk about life lessons they picked up in those days. But to answer your question, when Mike said, we are going to beat St. Richard's, which at the time was twice the size. There were 4 schools in what Mike was describing as the Catholic League: Holy Family, St. Therese, St. Mary's, and St. Richard's. And they all played each other twice each, home and away. So it's a little 6-game schedule for the little kiddos that are playing tackle football. And telling them they were going to beat St. Richard was, probably like telling your daughter's soccer team, you guys are going to knock off Team USA next week.
Right.
It sounded improbable, but those guys all told me he was serious, and he made us believe we could do it. And it didn't happen right away. They lost the 2 regular season games, but there was what was called the KC Bowl. The Knights of Columbus, of course, is the national service organization of the Catholic Church, and a local KC group. And Mike talked about having a KC Bowl, and they had a St. Richard, St. Mary's 3rd game that season. And then a titanic, epic comeback at the end. St. Mary's beat St. Richard that year.
Which is what the book's not just about the winnings. It's also, you mentioned, all about the life lessons in there. What is it about the fact that you have rivalry, you have life lessons, you have young lives impacted? It's a sports story through and through, as well as, you don't have to be from those schools or even recognize those names to enjoy the story that's being told. What do you think about sports triumph that transcends, even if you don't know the schools or the school's colors, or, obviously we have the connection with Girard, but regardless of that, what makes these type of stories so fascinating to people to read?
You and I are both parents, and you alluded to your daughter who's 6th grade here just a couple of minutes ago, and all of us want our kids to turn out well. We want them to grow up with values, hopefully we have, and we turn them loose and send them off to college, out into the work world, and get married. And I sure hope what we taught will hold, and they'll be good people and all that. But it's teachers and coaches I had growing up, and college professor too, you'd pick up something. Maybe there was a word of encouragement that touched you that didn't seem like much at the time, but good tackle. Nobody ever said that to me. I was no
so
football
never heard
player.
that either, but
nice job. Way to finally pass an algebra test. That's something, I guess. But encouragement, at that age, 10, 11, 12, 13, that is so important. And all the players and assistant coaches from St. Mary's that I interviewed, and these guys now in their mid-60s, some of them got pretty emotional talking about the impact those moments had on them, where they began to believe in themselves. And the repetition of being told, you can do this. You can, there's a current commercial for something. I don't remember the product, but you see this coach drawing a little circle up in the air on a wall, and this athlete can't quite get there. And he puts his hands on the kid's shoulders and says, I believe in you. Now get it done. You can do it. And eventually you see the guy making a leaping catch in right field to pull a home run back into the ballpark, and there's a cutaway to the coach, and he's grinning, and the player nods, and he gets it. But that kind of encouragement, Rebecca, I think, we've gotten in our lifetimes, a teacher or a coach or a parent or somebody. Sometimes it could be nonverbal, an arm around you, like, good job, go get them. And the players I interviewed had dozens of stories like that, where little bits of encouragement and actual visuals, like the one over St. Richard's, was stuff that they were able to parlay into adulthood, handling themselves in the business world. Okay, you don't think I can make this sales goal, but I'm going to show you. I know I can do it.
Coach Mike would be so proud of me for doing that.
Yeah.
I also think it's a reminder, too, Joe, of those of us who have influence over young people's lives, whether it's in Bible school or we are a coach or just, a volunteer coach at our T-ball or whatever it may be, that our words matter and that those kids sometimes need it. They may not always be getting it at home. And even if they are getting it at home, sometimes kids don't believe what their parents say in terms of, like, even the encouragement aspect, right? Or my parents are supposed to tell me I can do whatever I want. But to hear it from a third party or somebody from that perspective can just have such a vast impact. The other thing that I love is that the Saints of St. Mary's is a great story about the encouragement of a coach. And yes, they had winnings, but what about 5th and 6th graders? This wasn't world championships. This wasn't Super Bowls. This wasn't going on and creating college athletes or pro athletes. This is about the significant impact, the not overlooked, the middle school, the high school, sort of what team sports can bring when done appropriately with people who have their best interest at heart.
There's no doubt about that, and that's a big way those young men benefited. And one of the most poignant scenes in the book for me is after the St. Richard win, and they've got to go get on this raggedy old school bus that'll take them back over to the side of town where St. Mary's is. And a big surprise for the kids, and this is in late in the year 1969. Guess what? We're going to the People's Cafe, and we're going to have food, and it's going to be free. And the sister, who was the principal of the school, is saying, now look, we're going to get off the bus, and we're going to go in an orderly line. This is downtown. But the smiles and the voices of the guys I interviewed, they said that was just an unforgettable way to celebrate. All of them having hamburgers and hot dogs and ice cream with their buddies after a huge arch rival win.
So in the 80s and 90s, it was for me and Rhino. We went to the Pizza Hut. Like, that was our sort of way of doing it. And I think we can all sort of connect to that story of team sports and our childhood and how it affected us. But we've got more with co-author Joe Lee coming up next. .fm. We're also streaming from that SuperTalk Mississippi app. Of course, you can always find us, too, on your local SuperTalk Mississippi radio station. And don't forget to watch us. We are on your computer, your mobile device. Just head on over to SuperTalk TV. We're continuing our conversation with Joe Lee. He is co-author this time of The Saints of St. Mary's. It's a true story of old school values and parenting lessons learned through youth sports, and it's set back in the 1960s and 70s when fourth, fifth, and sixth graders, is that correct? Fourth, fifth, and sixth graders' experience in flag football is probably a little different than it was now, but all for the right reasons, and how a coach's encouragement can have a lasting impact, which to me, having that sixth grader now, Joe, just again reinforces how much encouragement, positive reinforcement, and then setting them up to have to work for something can really have lasting impact well into, even if they're never a professional athlete, that's not what it's about. Team sports can be about so much more.
Oh, there is no question about that. You know, my wife and I are the proud parents of a recently married young man named John. He is 26 and is doing great. He played 1 year of tackle football when he was at St. Anthony's School. This would have been fall 09, spring 10. And he'd not played any football, and he sure didn't get any football ability from his dad. And it was a tiny little team with 19 or 20 kids. And in the last game, and I'm thinking this was at Madison Ridgeland Academy, he made 3 or 4 tackles in the fourth quarter. And he got his hand stepped on very late in the game, and he was really upset about that. But all the coaches, and these were volunteer coaches like Mike Frascogna was back then, they all came up and gave him big attaboys. You played great today. This is what we thought you'd be doing all season. You're going to be a good, and it just seeing him light up, you know, that, I don't know if he remembers that, but I sure do. And I thought it was a great thing for him to acknowledge that to John that he'd done well. And you know, with your athletic background, I'm sure you had some coaches and trainers and teachers that, you know, told you some things that have stuck with you over the years.
Some good, some bad. But we're focusing on the positive.
That's right.
Positive today, which I think, but though you can also turn some of the bad into good as well. But so this is not your first rodeo in terms of writing. Is this your first rodeo in terms of co-authoring, though, Joe?
Yes, first work of nonfiction. You know, you've been wonderful enough to have me on show before, and we talk about the community of Oakdale and my head, which is in northeast Mississippi. Yeah, this is my first work of nonfiction, and you and I both have writing backgrounds, and I've done a lot of feature writing over the years, and I thought, well, okay, this is going to be a very long feature story with a whole lot of interviews and a whole lot of pictures. But the narrative came together pretty quickly for me. And the more I interviewed people, Rebecca, the more I would get different kinds of answers. Everybody had at least one little interesting tidbit that really came alive. And
because you weren't an athlete of Coach Mike's, correct?
No,
right.
I was not.
So I love that you wrote this from gathering from their perspective. You did not come in with a bias or jaded sort of perspective. You were gathering all the interviews from past players and stories and seeing the commonalities and putting the pieces together.
Oh, yeah. You know, I interviewed Mike first and interviewed him extensively. And his wife, Judy, and they've been married more than 50 years. Judy and Mike had just gotten married, and she was a first-year teacher at St. Mary's. She was teaching the fifth graders out there. And that was one of the big surprises for those kiddos on the first day. This is y'all's new coach. It's Coach Frascogna. And I'm sure those boys out there were like, oh my gosh!
That's Mrs. Frascogna's husband.
Yeah, he's the Joe Namath lookalike who just showed up, 2 wheels in the air with his Corvette or whatever he was driving with the shades and all that, and he indeed was the husband of the young fifth grade teacher. But
so, how do you approach those interviews, Joe? Because how many past players did you interview for the book?
13 or 14, and then there were a couple of assistant coaches and a couple of guys who played on opposing Catholic teams here in Jackson who offered a perspective. So 19 or 20 total interviews.
So how do you approach that? Because it's just, what is your experience and see what happens? Or did you have like intentional things that you wanted to know from each about their experience with Coach Mike?
I asked the same questions of everybody with wiggle room to go off in different directions based on where their answers led me. And it would, what's the first recollection you have of that, other than it was really hot and you ran for an hour and a half and you didn't want to eat for 3 more days. But the difference, the times in their lives where they would realize, I'm teaching my son the same thing I got at age 10, 27 years ago from Coach. I'm passing this on to my son. Or somebody would say, I was telling my grandson, a long time ago, and this is what he told me, and this is what you might want, and it's multi-generational. Because
and it takes you being a grandparent before you realize what lessons you were learning, right? Because if you would have interviewed these kids, once they graduated high school, they may have thought, oh yeah, Coach Mike had a little bit of impact, but they wouldn't have known the fruits of that labor until now, right? Like this book really couldn't have been written until now, in my perspective.
I would agree with that. We were talking about Gerard earlier. He told me that he coached, and this has probably been 25 years ago. One of his boys was 5th or 6th grade, and he coached in a Madison area football league. And he said, and I agree with this completely, kids are smart, and they can remember things, and they can pick up things. And he recalled how Mike Frascogna had a playbook. It wasn't probably a college football or NFL thing where you had to learn 88 different formations, but a little binder of sets that you had to learn as a 5th grader and 6th grader. And Gerard told me, if we could learn those, my son and his teammates can learn them. And another guy in the book, Mike Gerald, who went to high school in the Jackson area and who's one of the players I interviewed, I said to him, you played some high school football, or at least junior high football. How far along were you growing up and playing competitive football before the stuff you were being taught in 5th grade was being taught to you later? And he said, 9th grade, 8th grade. He said, when we played those boys in the Catholic League, we were doing things the other players had never seen before because Coach believed we could do it. Practice, practice, practice. No, run it again, run it again, run it again. The same basic plays over and over, and you can run them in your sleep. But they were throwing things at the other teams they'd never seen before. And that gave those boys so much confidence because it may not sound like it's something that could help you in a corporate boardroom or in some sales situation where there's a lot riding on it. But if you learn real young that you can be better than you think, that you can reach unattainable goals, maybe that does give you a big leg up in adulthood.
Absolutely. How does the book read, The Saints of St. Mary's? Is it a story? Is it a recollection of short stories throughout, of personal stories? When people pick it up and read it, how does it read?
It is a narrative. It's not short stories. It's a thematically arranged. There's 4 seasons worth of material covered, but you could sit down if you wanted to and read it straight through. And you don't jump around in time. You don't jump into different eras. But I refer to it as a narrative. And it's something that will make you laugh out loud in places. You'll shed a tear or two. There's a tragic moment in there that everybody, it was difficult for folks to talk about when I did the interviewing. But again, it's something that I think will have a lasting impact on folks, especially teachers and coaches and parents. There's a lot young parents and coaches can learn from this book.
How do we get it?
We get it online through dogwoodpress.com. That's my publishing house. And you can get signed copies tomorrow afternoon at Lemuria Books here in the capital city. We've got a come-and-go signing between 4:30 and 7 o'clock. And I will be, Starkville, Louisville, Gulf Coast, in the next 2 or 3 months. Dogwoodpress.com has my traveling schedule. Mike will be with me when available, but we are eager to get in front of groups and talk about the book.
Do you think your fictional town of Oakdale will get a football team soon in your next writing?
The next Oakdale book is in stages up here where all the other ideas live. We're probably a year away on that. I don't know about the football team. I've got plenty of bad guys I need to put in their place before we talk football.
Well, congratulations on your new book, The Saints of Saints Mary. Again, a true story of old school values and parenting lessons learned through youth sports. I would say if you've been a coach, thinking about being a coach, or a coach to youth sports, if you just love sports stories, I think it'd make a great movie.
Oh, it would make a wonderful movie. And this is relevant for boys and girls of all ages. Any coach, any teacher, any parent, I think will find something good in that book.
Even if you choose not to read it, I think walk away with the reminder that your words to young people matter. And so even if you put big dreams in their head, that's okay. Believing in them matters the most, I think, is what I walk away with it from. Joe, but thank you for your time.
My pleasure. It's good to see you again, Rebecca.
And you guys stick with us. We got some fun things for you to do on your main street near you.